I am so excited tonight. One of my favorite wrestlers to watch, a true pro wrestler in every sense of the word, the one and only Tyson Kidd, TJ Wilson. TJ, thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight.
Oh, my pleasure, Mike. Thanks a lot for having me on here.
Well, I probably should have told you this before I hit record. There's so much meat on the bone for your story. I might need you here to like Labor Day. I hope you have nothing planned for the next foreseeable future, because
yeah.
I have a lot to go over with you.
Yeah, hell yeah.
You and Teddy Hart were elementary school friends, correct?
Yeah.
What was it like for Teddy to be in school, being the wrestler kid? Was there any kind of like pressures from the other kids? Did he have to defend wrestling? How'd that work for him?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that he had to defend wrestling early on when we were kids. I think it was at first, especially at first, it was the cool thing. It was like, I remember kind of the whispers of like, oh, and I wasn't allowed to watch wrestling prior to meeting Ted. I'd watched some wrestling. My older cousin introduced me to it. I tried some of the moves on my sisters at home, and my mom quickly banned wrestling in our house, which I understood. I had Ninja Turtles still, so I wasn't gonna fight for it.
Nice.
It was so new to me. I really enjoyed what I saw, but I didn't have the opportunity to really fall in love yet with my mom. So anyway, when Teddy comes to my school, I was there first. He like the whispers of like Bret Hart's nephew, and even though I hadn't been bitten yet, obviously I live in Calgary. I know who Bret Hart is. So like that was at first it was like, and I say at first, honestly, I remember getting in fights a little bit later on in junior high, defending wrestling, but at first, I don't know why I keep saying at first. Really, no. It was always kind of this commodity. Funny enough, there is a funny story. I think we're like maybe 11 or 12, and some kind of weird altercation in the local neighborhood. And I remember maybe Teddy was going to get in a fight with a guy. This guy was in his house, and one of his friends like kind of came out and was like, "Hey, I don't think you guys should fight this guy." And then it was like, "Well, why?" And he was like, so this guy was talking about his friend, not Teddy. He said, because that guy's uncle is the British Bulldog, which was like so funny and comical, of like all the guys you could pick in the whole world. That's Teddy's uncle. Like what? you picked the wrong person to lie about. It's very funny.
Awesome.
It's very comical.
That's great.
Fight ended up like there was no fight, but it like that almost like literally eased all whatever tension was. I don't remember, we're kids. It's probably over absolutely nothing, but whatever tension there was like dissipated from like that lie, because it just was so comical to us. So honestly, like I said, like that guy used a lie as an excuse to like sound cool and get it. So in Calgary, at least, like I said, I got in a fight at school defending it one time, but that was later. That was like in 9th grade. But really not really. It was kind of looked at as very cool that he was a member of the family.
You said, I didn't get the bug yet. I didn't get the wrestling bug yet. When did you? For me, I was in 7th grade. Macho Man Randy Savage came off the top rope on Ricky Steamboat, broke his larynx. I was hooked. That was my, from casual fan to this is the greatest thing ever. What was it for you?
Mine, and it obviously sounds so biased, with my history and stuff, but definitely like the moment of like, I kind of got bit by both at the same time, kind of like fell in love with it as a fan, but then at the exact same time, I don't know, the 12-year-old in me just like knew this is what I was going to do. And it's SummerSlam 92, Brett versus Davey Boy. It was SummerSlam 92 that like, and it was that Brett versus Davey that like, literally, I bit really hard, obviously.
Now, were you able to like hang out with Brett, hang out with Davey? Did you get to know these guys when you were a kid?
I remember vividly Teddy calling me and saying, "Hey, you should come to Sunday dinner tonight. Brett's going to be there." And then I remember having to take like 2 or 3 public transit buses to get there. And Brett and I have a funny story about that first encounter. Not the first time I meet him, but that first day, we get into a little bit of an argument with his son, Dallas, earlier. Like, I met Brett. Now we kind of I met Dallas a few times. I knew Dallas prior to this. We got into an argument with Dallas, and then to the point of like the first time that it's a funny story, but the first time I meet Brett, he actually told me off, and rightfully so. That's the best part. Is it was deserved, and it was a hell of a way to meet Brett. But Davey, Jim, they lived in Florida at that time. I met Davey actually just prior to him moving to Florida, and then they moved. They lived in Florida. Davey and Harry and Vanna and Georgia, and Jim lived in Florida too. So I would see them when there would be live events in Calgary, and then or they'd come up in the summertime. Owen, same thing. I would see them around, and then as I start spending more time at Ted's parents, which they owned a gym, so they lived above it in these living quarters, but their house was a gym. So I would start seeing like Owen there and Davey and Jim, and then later Brett.
What were your initial impressions of Stu?
My initial impressions, I grew up without a father. I grew up with my mom and my two sisters, so I was always very intimidated by like my friends' dads and stuff like that growing up. And Stu was no different. Meeting him was no different. I was very intimidated. He is like the most generous man ever, but also a very tough guy. First thing, he's funny. You see him even at that age, like in his late 70s, and mid 70s, I probably met him. But even meet him, like he had like these it's the most friendly looking eyes. But then, like, you look at his hands, and they're like so thick, and like you could just tell they're so strong. And he had that gruff voice. He was very intimidating to me, but he wasn't. That was just my take on him. He wasn't trying to be. He was very, very friendly, very friendly. I got invited up to a Sunday dinner, which I thought was like such a cool honor, and then like I kind of got snowballed in, and eventually, like, there just was no invite. It just was like it just almost was expected. And I'm eternally grateful for all of that time that I spent there. Stu was very good to me, but I first initially meeting him and not knowing him personally, but knowing of him, he was intimidating and scary.
Now, how did you go from this is TJ, the adopted heart, to this is TJ, we're going to break him into the wrestling business? Like, how did that start?
Man, so it's probably all Harry's idea. But Harry and Teddy's brother wrestled a match at in this town outside of Calgary called Rockyford. So at 1 year, I don't know how it came about, but it was like, hey, Harry and Teddy's brother Matt are going to have a match. So I remember Ted came to my house to borrow my video camera to record it. And he was like, hey, why don't you just come? And I didn't want to go. I was like, no, I'm okay. And then I had a friend over, and my friend's like, well, I'm going to go home anyway. And I was like, well, I guess I'll go. I remember Ted and I sitting front row. We watched Harry and Matthew's match, and, and the rest of the matches. And if I thought I was bit before going live and seeing it that close, and then seeing Harry and Matt on the show, now I was absolutely engulfed. It was this passion and this love of wrestling was only going to get more intense. It wasn't going anywhere. So sitting there watching, I remember Ted and I kind of looking at each other and being like, next year, that'll be us. And then Harry, again, like I said, he lived in Florida, and the way to communicate in 94, the fall of 94, is through Harry would fax. He would send faxes. He would write out a note and fax it to Matt and Ted. And he wrote a fax and said, hey, next year, maybe we should do some kind of a tag match with Harry, with TJ and Ted. And that was Harry at 9 years old. This was it. He had his first match at 8, and then like right before he turned 9, and then he's 9. And this is how his brain's working at 9 years old, 8, 9 years old. This is unbelievable. So he planted that seed. So then we started like figuring out, like, we would take bumps and stuff on a crash pad. We were definitely not ready for a ring or the dungeon yet.
How old were you?
I was 14 when we start kind of like self-teaching, when we start becoming like self-taught a little bit. And I remember I broke my wrist. So Rockford Rodeo's in like the 3rd week of July, and I broke my wrist in the beginning of June. And I remember thinking like, oh no, I'm not having a match now. But I cut my cast off 2 weeks early. I remember Teddy came to my house again and was like, listen, we have a little tryout with Ross Hart tomorrow. He needs to see a match with us. He's coming to the gym at 11 a.m. You have to cut this cast off, and we have to go map this match out. So we did exactly that. I got my mom to cut my cast off, and it's insane, man. I don't know how any of this ended up becoming real.
If Teddy didn't go to your grade school, what would you be doing today?
You don't understand how many times I've thought about this. I honestly don't know. I literally don't know. I'd be like, I still love playing like video games, but before I wasn't an athlete at all. Before Teddy, like, again, same kind of thing, like really forced me into doing these things that I didn't want to do. I really just wanted to play Street Fighter. But Teddy wasn't having it. No, we had to go outside and play catch, or we had to go play hockey, or like he was always very active, which was very good for me. I didn't always enjoy it at the time, but a couple years later, I was like very grateful for it. But yeah, I mean, if not for Teddy, if I didn't meet him or he didn't come to my school, I don't know. I'm at a loss. I honestly don't know what I would be doing.
Now, at 15, you started wrestling for Stampede, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was it an actual territory at the time, or was it just
no?
Show there?
It was just kind of those Rockyford shows. So it was just kind of like when it first started. So 95, I had my first match. 95, they had just kind of those 2 Rockyford shows, and then it's dormant until like that next July. 96 is when we kind of have was when we have our second match. Teddy's brother passed away from flesh-eating disease, maybe like 10 days before. And they let us do a tag match with our friend kind of in his place as a tribute to him. And that summer they booked a couple other little shows in Alberta, like so we wrestled Rockyford that year. I remember there was a show in this town called Tabor and Pincher Creek. And then 97, Stampede started booking more shows. And then that's when 97, 98, they started doing a lot of out-of-town shows. We didn't wrestle Calgary until 99.
Tell me about training with Bret Hart, because for me, Bret Hart is the greatest professional wrestler ever.
Yeah, I'm pretty inclined to agree with you on that. I try to break wrestling down as much as I can, and I mean it's pretty tough to top Bret. A lot of his work, or like a lot of his like class, like I would say a lot. I say all. I think all of his classic matches hold up. They stand the test of time. It's not like you watch him now and they're like, well, you have to be in that era to really understand it. You don't. That's actually, I think it's actually even more so that his stuff really translates now, even more maybe than in real time.
Agreed.
So Bret one time came by Stu's while we were outside. And so one time Bret came like driving down the hill as we were in the ring. Then he just like, I guess he stayed in his car for a minute and just like watched us. And then like watched us and then went into the house. And then like, I remember we went in the house a little bit later and he was like, hey, I saw you guys, kind of like had some nice words for us. That was like June of 96. That was, it honestly might have been the last day we were wrestling with Teddy's brother before he got sick, actually. And so then fast forward, so that was the end of June 1996. Teddy's brother passes away, like I said, in July 1996. And then in October 1996, we wrestle on a WWF live event at the Saddle Dome. And Brett hadn't fully come back to the company yet. I don't think he'd signed yet. I think he wasn't sure. And he came to that show and he watched us. And I think he was very impressed. And I think he was like, oh, wow, like these guys like really do love, there's something here. They're not just kids kind of screwing around. And that was when that's when he extended the invite to come train at his house. Brett would come in and he would work with us and I'll tell you how I really won him over. He's funny. He has a great memory. You might remember this. So he was talking about King of the Ring 93. And he mentioned about like how he doesn't win any of the matches with the sharpshooter. And then he was like talking about the psychology of it. And he's like, so I had them, he almost like quizzed us. He's like, had him take out a body part. Do you remember what it was? And I remember like Ted instantly, yes, you know.
Man, right? Yeah.
Ted instantly said the knee. And Brett said no. And then I thought for a second, I was like, no, I remember Razor Ramon stomping his hand.
Yeah.
I remember he goes to the sharpshooter, Mr. Perfect. I said, no, your hand, your fingers. And he like looked at me like, this is 1996, it's 3 years later. And I think he was like, well, this kid's not even in the family. Like, how did he pick that up? I'm telling you, like, I'm pretty sure that was the moment that like really won him over, is that I remembered. And it's funny that you instantly knew. Like, I know you've done your homework for sure.
No, I'm a huge Bret Hart fan. I remember too, it was either a second or third match before they even first locked up. Bret grabbed his hand and went, just for a second, just to plant that little seed, my hands hurt.
Which is funny because I didn't know it at the time, but it's something, it probably goes, and maybe even in plenty of times before that, but it obviously goes back to that, the match where he beats Flair for the title. He pulls his finger. So like, this is a funny storytelling that he is incredible at. Incredible.
So Bret has an actual ring. What do you have, a wrestling room in his house?
Brett, just like you, I think maybe, did they show it in Wrestling with Shadows? But he like in his pool room at that house, that's where the ring also was set up. So over time, I don't know if it was like the condensation from like the pool and the hot tub, but like the metal all started to kind of like those old rings. I don't know I mean, man, there was no give to that ring. That thing hurts so much, but we're wrestling in front of Brett and we're 16. So you're invincible. So it didn't matter how hard that ring was. And no matter how hard it was softer than the dungeon. So
what can you tell me about Deep South? And Bill DeMott was a trainer there at the time, correct?
He was the trainer when I did my tryout. When I get signed and then I report to Deep South, because it took me a little while because of my work visa. When I got there, it was I did my week-long trial. Bill DeMott was there, and he was very, very cool and very respectful to me. I didn't have a bad word to say about him. And then Bill really helped me with my promo that week, because I had to film. I had a match, and I had to film a promo. And the match is very funny. It was October 5th, 2006 is my tryout match with Kofi at Deep South. And it's exactly a decade after that Calgary match I had as a kid. That's October 5th, 1996. My tryout is October 5th, 2006. So like, I have to believe in fate. Otherwise, like we said earlier, if I don't meet Teddy, like we're not having this interview. I don't know, like how are we like the only kids ever to have this like match on a WWE show, and then 10 years later, like to the day, I'm having my tryout match with one of the greatest humans on the planet, Kofi Kingston. But we had a good crew of guys, Fandango, Brian Myers, Matt Cardona. Like, I love those guys. Heath, Sonny Siaki, Alpha Jr., Manu, Connor from the Ascension. Brian Cage was there, but not under contract. Like, he and I had a really fun match at a Deep South. It was a dark match, but a Deep South tape. I think this might have been the last show. I think it was the last Deep South show. Me against Brian Cage is a dark match. I'm pretty positive.
So what happens once Deep South closes? Where do you go? Florida?
Yep, go to Florida. We're gonna be in Tampa. We don't know where yet. So they're like actively finding a place.
In Florida, is that where they started teaming you and Harry up together?
We did a match in Deep South. We did a tag. At one point it was on YouTube against Bad Seed and John Bolin. They were trying. Harry and Kofi had done some tag team stuff in OVW they were looking at, and then maybe as a consolation, Harry and I did we did one match, and then FCW, like the first FCW show in Florida. It's Harry and I against Sonny Siaki and Alpha Jr., which, I mean, if I were to watch it back now, I would have 10 million critiques, no doubt about it. But at the time, I remember being like really happy with the match, and I thought I know all four of us worked really hard, and I remember really enjoying the match. Obviously, I'm probably my own worst critic, but if I were to watch it back, I'd have 10 million critiques. But in the moment, I really enjoyed it, and it was fun. So Harry and I started teaming almost right away in FCW, and then they switch over to Harry and Ted and Natty, and they went to OVW for like maybe a month or a couple. I know they went a couple times for like a couple weeks trying them out, because OVW was already set up with TV and they had shows. FCW, now we're starting from scratch. We're in a warehouse, basically like a warehouse where it's like maybe like a Costco supplier or something. So we have 2 rings set up, and then we have like all these cans, like canned goods, and no air conditioning, one big fan. And when you're first come to Tampa in the summertime, it's hot. It's really hot and really humid. That place was hot. But Harry and I started teaming in Florida. Then the company was looking at Ted and Harry as a tag team with Natty. I guess because technically I wasn't a heart, which I understand. I had no sour feelings about it. It's totally fine. I get it.
So tell me about getting called up to the main roster. I mean, it's got to be like a dream come true. You're there with your girlfriend, and pretty soon you're there with one of your best friends. I mean, you couldn't write a better story than that for you, correct?
No, and you're 100% right, and especially in hindsight, in the moment, obviously it's awesome, but it's also very scary, because again, it's like the way I've always looked at it, at everything I've ever done in wrestling is like, now I'm going to another new place. So right before I get called up, Sean Spears got called up in that ECW talent initiative or whatever. And after a little bit, then he got let go. Colt ends up getting let go the week I get called up. And these guys had done about 2 years in developmental. Kazarni is a little bit later. Like his vignettes, like he's debuted already, but he's gonna get let go in a little bit after I debut. Ryan Braddock. So I was excited getting called up, but there was also like the back of my mind, like I think I'm on this bubble of like you're not
flying under the radar anymore. The spotlight's on you.
Yeah, and it's like, man, I think it really feels like it's DJ Gabriel's another one. I end up wrestling him, but then he gets let go a little bit after that. And I'm just not trying to bring up bad memories for those guys. I'm just saying, like, this is how I'm looking at that landscape in that moment. And I'm like, am I about to get called up, do a couple weeks, and then get let go too? Like, I really hope not. And but when I saw, like, when the promo was like Natty saying that Brett trained me and I was being paired with Natty. I remember Kidman came in from the road, and he was still doing FCW stuff. And he told me, he said, hey, in the meeting, they brought up that they might call you up next week and have you debut and have you paired with Natty, which I knew if it's just me by myself, I might be in big trouble. But if it's at least paired with Natty, and then when I saw like the verbiage was saying that like Brett trained me, I was like, okay, I have an in. I have somewhat of an in. It at least allows a little opening. Then it's on me to at least try to crack it open further. But it gives me something, is what I felt. So, but I'm telling you, man, I don't know that I'd ever been that nervous before. I'm behind the curtain, and the guy that I wrestled is actually a ref for us now, and on my debut, and I just remember sitting there, and I looked at Natty and I said, I can't do this, and they were like, the vignettes playing, we're literally about to go out, and I was like, I can't do this. And Natty's like, what are you talking about? Of course you can. I'm like, my knees were shaking. I was like, my teeth were almost chattering. I'm not exaggerating. And my music hit that I'd never heard before. This music hit for the very first time. And like, once I stepped through, I felt great. Like, God, man, that feeling right before was horrible.
Where'd you wrestle?
A guy named Bao Nguyen. He was an extra, and now he's a referee for us.
What can you tell me about WrestleMania with Brett and Vince? That had to be huge.
That was insane. That was so insane.
Yeah.
I got called to Gorilla because we're on the West Coast. We're in Phoenix, and so everything starts real early locally. And so we had to be there. I remember the bus to the stadium was really early. Anyway, I think I'm there. It's like 10 o'clock or 11 a.m. And I was doing something, and I get called by myself, specifically to Gorilla. And then it's me and Vince, and we have a one-on-one talk where he kind of lays out. We had a meeting the night before where they kind of laid this out, but then this day he lays out kind of like what my job specifically is. And I said, okay. And then he said, okay. And Vince told me, he said, I want you to have a WrestleMania moment. And I was, I mean, you hear that from Vince McMahon. I mean, I had like a million thoughts going through my mind. And he's like, what if, he said, can you do your finish to me off the top rope to the floor? And I said, I mean, whatever he asked me, I was going to do, yes, or try to. Yes. And I said, yes, sir, absolutely. And he's like, have you done it before? And I'm thinking like, of course not. Vince, if you haven't seen me do it, I promise you I haven't done it on a live event somewhere. Right. I promise you. And I was like, I said, yeah, I can do it. He's like, all right. And I'm thinking, it was very funny. It was so funny. He's like, in my head, I'm thinking the thing that's going to break my fall is I'm going to have to hit Vince pretty hard. I'm going to have to hook him pretty hard on the way down. And as I'm thinking that, he said to me, he said, how exactly did he's like, yeah, make sure you really hit me with it. And I was thinking, you don't even know. I've already gone there. It's coming. His head bounced pretty good that day.
Yeah.
But I had to break my fall, but he wanted it that way. So, I mean, that was incredible to have. I know obviously it might not have played out the way fans had hoped or had envisioned or whatever, but you're talking about two guys that, Brett, he's a stroke survivor and now also a cancer survivor, but at that time he's a stroke survivor and had a miraculous comeback. I mean, if you're expecting a 5-star match, it's not going to happen. But in terms of the story of like this guy that got screwed and these things happen, the story all makes sense. It's just, I get it. But for me, it was amazing. I loved every second of it. I loved being a part of it. I loved, I didn't know that, I didn't know it was going to spin off to the next day. Like, I have no clue at that point that the next day we're going to wrestle Miz and Big Show on Raw, and Brett's all of a sudden out there with us every week. I had no clue that was in the cards. So, I mean, WrestleMania is here, and then it just kept like riding for us. I was on cloud nine. I didn't expect any of that.
Did
But
you guys
to be involved in like Brett versus Vince is insane.
Yeah, it is. Did you guys win a tag belts the next night, or was it like a month from that?
It's like a month later. I think initially we were supposed to have. I believe we were supposed to have. It's funny because Brett kind of knew the plans. I never knew any of the plans. I believe we were supposed to have like a tornado tag match at Extreme Rules, but that's when the volcano stuff happens and all the Raw guys get stuck over in Europe. So that final Raw that before the pay-per-view that was supposed to like set the match, we don't do because Miz and Big Show are stuck in Ireland. So Extreme Rules turns into like a tag gauntlet, and we just come in on the end and we win that tag gauntlet on the very end, and then that sets up the title match the next day against Miz and Big Show. And that was in Richmond, Virginia, the title match. And I have a lot of fond memories of that match and that crowd and just that day. It was fun, man. And like my very first match ever is teaming with Harry. And then not to the day, but 15 years later, we become WWE Tag Team Champions together with Natty and with Brett. I mean, it seems like like if you saw that on a TV series or in a movie, you'd think it was like too far fetched, but it's like, I don't know. It's this weird fate stuff.
Why did they break you and Harry up?
So I don't know if that was in the cards, but I knew that. I remember when I found out Harry and I were losing the tag titles at Night of Champions. I remember thinking, okay, now are we just going to be a team that kind of floats a little bit? And I was like, I don't really want to be that after we just did a lot of really good work, especially, I mean, on live events all around the country with the Usos, like matches I was very proud of all over the place. I remember texting Harry and I said, hey man, I'm pretty sure we're losing the titles on Sunday. I said, not a big deal. I said, but I don't want us just to be a team that becomes cannon fodder. I said, no one's told me that that's the plan, but I said, I think, and I knew what kind of chemistry we had as opponents. And I said, let's show the world some of our chemistry our chemistry as opponents too. And I said, what would you prefer to be, like a good guy or a bad guy, heel or babyface? And then he said that he would prefer to be babyface. I said, that's perfect for me. At that pay-per-view, I knew it was in Chicago. I wanted to meet with Vince. And I happened to be walking up these stairs as Vince is walking down. And he was like, I think he called me Tyson. He's like, Tyson. And I was like, damn, what a night. I said, hey, sir, it's great to see you. I said, actually, I wanted to come by and run an idea by you if you have a chance, if you have a minute. And he said, and I knew pay-per-view days were pretty good because the show's pretty much set. And he said, yeah, come by in a little bit. And I did. And I pitched him. I pitched real high. I pitched like that. I knew Calgary was coming up, and I pitched something where like I kicked Brett in the stomach and put him in a figure four on the post and like screw Harry out of him. I pitched. I aim for the stars, but yeah. but Vince listened to me, and he did go as far as like I said. I kind of wanted it a little like I said. The way I see it in my head is almost a little bit like Brett and Owen, where it looks like Harry and I are maybe like you don't know who's going to turn on who. It looks like maybe we patch things up and then it happens, and that's obviously not on the same level, but that was what Vince allowed. So I literally didn't know when, like, I didn't know when this turn was going to happen. I didn't pitch for this specific, besides it being Calgary. Once we did Calgary and it didn't happen, I didn't know when the hell it was going to happen. So, so I guess it was my idea. I don't know if there were any plans or if we had a chance at like interjecting ourselves into plans by good performance good performances or not. And I didn't want to take that chance. So I thought I would honestly rather like struggle as a singles than kind of take away what we did as a tag team. That's how I felt.
I hear cats.
Yeah, it's paws meowing.
Are you okay? Get him on camera. Let the dozens and dozens of my watchers.
I don't know where he's at right now. Normally
there was a brown one on the counter before. Was that Paws?
No.
Yeah.
No. Paws. He is more of like a light color. He's very loud. Paws. He's trying to get Natty's mom's attention. Trying to get his grandma's attention. I don't know where he's at. I don't even see him. I don't know where he's at.
Do you mind talking about your injury?
Yeah, no problem.
So take us through that night. What happened? And what happened right after? Did you know you were hurt? Did you take us through that if you don't mind?
Yeah. Let me think. So we were in San Antonio for Raw. The night before was Elimination Chamber network special, and I had a dark match with Samoa Joe, and I don't 100% know why this happened. I think I had my arms underneath his arms, which was just applying too much pressure. I took it wrong. Anyway, take a muscle buster, and when we land, I see the whitest, like I've been rocked before, and you kind of see like stars or like almost a flash of what this felt like. I saw like the whitest light ever, and it was really thick, if that makes any sense. It was like took forever to get through this white light, and as I get through that white light, I'm paralyzed, completely paralyzed from my neck down, and my body feels like it weighs like 10 million pounds, or I can't move anything. Joe pins me 1, 2, 3. Cesaro goes to pull me out. I said, no, don't touch me. And I don't know how he could hear me. Like, I mean, we're in an arena, and I wasn't like screaming. I wasn't really able to move. Like 1, 2, 3, at about like 3, I can start to move my fingers a little bit. So probably paralyzed for like 5 or 6 seconds, which when you're paralyzed feels like a lot longer than that. Any longer, I probably would have started panicking. So, I mean, I'm very thankful. Even those 5 or 6 seconds, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. It's scary, but luckily I didn't have to sit there long enough to really start to panic. I just knew that this was not good. And at first I didn't have any pain. Then start getting like feeling back. And then once I get the feeling back while I'm sitting in the ring, intense pain in the back of my neck. And I remember the ref came and asked me, he said, "Are you okay?" I said, "No." I said, "I broke my neck." And he was like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, I broke my neck, man." And Natty, I said, she saw I was hurt. She just, her instincts, she just ran off to find help. She ran off. So now it's Cesaro and I in the ring, and he said, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I broke my neck." And he's like, I think he thought I was, I don't know what he thought, but I'm sure he was hoping I was exaggerating or just mad. I got up and I jumped out of the ring.
You walked to the back.
Yeah. I jumped out of the ring, and Cesaro said, "Hey, I thought you said your neck's broken." And I said, "It is." And he's like, "Well, how did you do that?" And I just said, "I don't know." That was like our exact conversation. That was like verbatim our conversation at ringside. Then we walk up through Gorilla. I go to the locker room, I shower, which I shouldn't have done any of this, but I showered. Then I go to the trainer's room. Then they have medics come and look at me, and then go to the hospital. And from there, they take me to, they do x-rays and probably CAT scan. And then from there, like, this team like comes in and they're like, they cut my shirt off. They're like, I said, I can just take it off. They're like, no, you cannot move your head. And I was like, guess now's not the time to tell them that I've already showered and done these other things. Oh, I can laugh about it now. It's obviously very scary in the moment. So they brought me to this other hospital that specializes in cervical injuries, and did an MRI that night. I remember, so I've done a lot of MRIs. At the time, I'd only ever done one prior for my knee. And I remember, so I have the collar on, and my neck is, for lack of a better term, broken. It wasn't technically broken, but it's actually worse than a break. The ligament holding my C2 in place ruptured. So now my C2 hit my spinal cord. That's what the white light was. They call it a spinal cord concussion. That's what that was. And that's what the temporary paralysis was. Luckily, it wasn't worse. You don't have to sever your spinal cord to be paralyzed. You can touch it and be paralyzed. So I dodged a lot of bullets. I dodged rounds and rounds of machine gun bullets that day. So anyway, they had me on this MRI. My neck is, like I said, for lack of a better term, broken. I have the collar on. And then this is the only MRI I've ever done where like they almost put like this Hannibal Lecter mask over top. And I remember they're like, all right, it's going to be loud, blah, blah, blah. Like, try not to move. And I just remember thinking, like, I couldn't move if I tried. I had this collar on, and I got this Hannibal Lecter mask on, and I was like, and my neck hurts a lot. I was like, if you paid me to move, it'd be tough to move right now. So, and then I remember spending the night in like almost the basement of this like hospital. I had no phone service, no real answers yet. And then the doctor came in the morning, and that's when he kind of delivered the news that I remember he came walking in, and he was like, hey, so through your MRIs, like, you won't wrestle again, and I'd like to do surgery like immediately. And it was like, whoa, hold on. And it was, that night, obviously sitting there with my neck, I remember thinking, I don't think I'll ever be able to wrestle again. And so when he came and said that in the morning, even though it was like still very fresh, I'd already kind of like told myself that. So that wasn't so alarming. But then Natty was very funny. She was like, well, hold on. Are you the best surgeon? Or like, are you the best for this surgery? Because he said it's very tricky. It's your C1. We would have to fuse your C1 and C2, which is as high up as it goes. Right. And Natty said, hold on, are you the best? And to his credit, he said, well, no, I wouldn't say I was the best. So he's like, I could do this, but I wouldn't say I was the best. And Natty said, no, luckily through WWE, like we have access to the best. So like, we're not going to, and with an injury like this, we're not going to mess around. And so then the next few days, I sat in this hospital in San Antonio. They moved me up to a proper room and stuff. But now they're working on an airlift to get me to Tampa, which is where my surgeon it's also where I live, but just happens to be where my surgeon that I end up going through, he happens to be located here at that time. Now he's in Phoenix. But man, like, it was scary. It was a very scary ordeal. It was, there was no malice or bad intent in anything. It just was a circumstance. It was just a whirlwind or a thunderstorm of like awful circumstances, like kind of bundled into one. Awful. But then on the other side is, luckily, I was okay. I remember I went to UFC once, and I was in this VIP room, and there was this guy in a wheelchair asked me for a picture, and we got to talking a little bit, and And he asked me, he said, what did you have done? I said, my C1 and C2. And he was like, his eyes got so big. And he said, man, you should be in this wheelchair with me, but you should have like the breathing. I said, believe me, I know that. And we had a great talk. I remember telling him, I said, he was like, man, thanks so much for talking to me. And I was like, nah, I said, what's funny is you may not believe this, but I definitely got more out of this talk with you than you got out of this talk with me. And yeah, so that's basically the gist of my injury. Obviously, it took me a couple of years to like really heal and be able to kind of heal, you know, both physically and mentally, spiritually, to come back to wrestling. It was you know, I almost did it for exactly 20 years. I had my very first match in July 23rd, 1995, and my injury is June 1st, 2015. So it's almost exactly 20 years. So, I mean, it took for me to come back in 2 years and be a producer, to me, I think this is pretty good time to heal physically and then begin to heal and be able to understand that, like, that's what I used to do. Being in the ring is what I used to do. Now this is this new role I'm going to try out.
You look fantastic. Do you have any effects from the injury that affect your everyday life?
Yeah, like my neck. Obviously, I don't have full. He's on the warpath now. I actually can see him walking around. He's pause.
Here.
What are you doing? Come here. He's being bad. Where he wants attention, but he won't come get it. So I don't have full rotation. I was supposed to only regain like 50%, which would probably be like that. But I have way more than I'm supposed to have. So I'm grateful for. The truth is, man, I feel really good. I feel really good when I wake up in the morning. Like my hips don't hurt, my knees don't hurt. Pause. What are you doing? He's finally. I might finally get him. What are you doing? What are you doing? Like crying up there. Here he is.
There we go.
Champion.
That's a big cat.
What are you doing? Like crying. This guy's too funny. He's very personable. That's why he's crying. But yeah, like, and I think I've gotten used to knowing that like my neck has a certain amount of motion to it, and certain things, if I push it, will bother it. So I think even subconsciously, I've gotten used to these kind of things, and I'm pretty good about not pushing my neck like that. And yeah, so I mean, obviously, sometimes the muscles in my neck will be like tight or stiff, but for the most part, and yeah, I get a lot of massages. I get a lot of work done on me a lot. So that definitely helps. And I think it's just, I obviously, you know, I think everyone in wrestling has a high threshold of pain. So, I mean, honestly, like my friend asked me this the other day too. He said, hey, how's your neck feel like on a daily basis? And I said, honestly, I feel pretty good. And I don't have a lot of, I probably just have little aches and pains. I don't have any kind of like lingering. Yeah. Brett told me when I turned 42, he said, wait till you're like 42. I remember he's like, how old are you now? And I was like, 38. And he's like, wait till you're like 42. I was like, 42? Why is that? But anyway, that's how old I am now. Right? And thus far, I feel great still.
Oh my, tell us about your job today. Because, I mean, when you talk about wrestling, you were like me or other people that just there's such a passion in your voice about pro wrestling. You could tell, like I said before we hit record, you know, you were a pro wrestler, and
yeah,
every sense of the word, you know, like you must be an awesome producer at your job. Like, what is that you do now for the WWE?
I love my job. I'm a producer backstage, so I help kind of like, it's funny. A lot of people I don't think understand, and that's fine. Maybe they're not supposed to understand. It's a tricky position, but I don't like book a match, but a match that's already set, I help design it and put it together with the parameters of, you know, whatever the story is or what orders I might have that day of like, oh, this is how we kind of want this executed. Okay, no problem. So I help talent put the match together. I help with ideas. I help come up with finishes and stuff like that. And just some days maybe talent don't need any help. They kind of have it all put together. And then some days maybe they're struggling a little bit and need a little help. It just like, I mean, it's life. Some days our brains work, we're firing on all cylinders. And some days even that 6 cup of coffee is not really going to help get you through. It's going to just barely help get you through. You need a little extra help to really do it. So, it varies. That's part of what I love is I say this obviously a lot about WWE, but really it's wrestling. No 2 days are the same. No 2 days are exactly the same. Like 2 days might feel very close, but no 2 days are exactly the same in my world. So that's what keeps it fun and fresh. And we're always the traveling gets rough, but the good side of it is you're in front of a new audience and you're in a new city. And especially during the summer where like every city's pretty beautiful. It's fun. It's fun to travel.
Tell me about the fact that you're training guys now.
Yeah. So I always knew that I wanted to, I've trained people before. So I always knew I wanted to do that on this level. And I trained people before and they've turned out fairly good, very good. Like the one guy, Michael Richard Blaze, he is an amazing professional wrestler, amazing. I knew that like with the knowledge I have now, I could really help train people. And so I remember talking with Vince during the pandemic, and I rented a warehouse, and I got a ring from Vince. So I have an official like WWE ring. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I like training people from scratch, but what I really love is fine tuning people. Angelo Dawkins being a huge example of somebody who right now is, I think, catching a lot of people's eyes. Moose came in and trained. A guy from NXT, Nathan Frazier, unbelievable talent. It's so fun for me to see like the growth in like Dawkins, or originally it started with a lot of the women like Liv, Lana, Sonia, Mandy. All the girls like Charlotte, Asuka. Almost every girl's at least come by the ring at least one time, and like a girl like Liv kept coming a lot. Lana kept coming a lot. Like Nia's been there. Shayna, Sasha, Naomi, Tamina, Carmella. Everybody. Zelina. If I miss any names, it's not out of slight. I'm just trying to think. But like I love seeing that progression a lot. And then there's a couple guys that I've trained from scratch that are there. And so like it's cool for I always tell them sometimes like, hey, don't let it get lost on you that like you're around all these, like you've only been wrestling it now, a year, and you're around like a lot of WWE people, like a lot, and a lot of like influential people. And I said, like, don't just take it for granted. And the 2 kids that I've trained from scratch, they both are very humble. They're both great kids, and they're picking things up very fast. They're gonna do very well. They're both young. They have a lot of time, and they have a lot of promise, and they've made a lot of progress. And we have there's a guy Gino from Booker T's school. Like there's a good assortment of. I was looking around yesterday. Like there's a guy Chico. He's trained from like the Samoans. Dawkins in there. He's like an NXT. He's a product of NXT. You got Moose in there, like from the NFL. You got these guys did like a 6-man tag yesterday. You have Nathan Frazier trained by Seth. You got Gino trained by Booker. I just remember looking. I was like, damn, this is like a all-star cast of people they were trained by. Like, what is like every guy that was in that matches? I was like, man, their futures are so big and so bright. That's what's so cool in my role now is like explaining something to somebody verbally, because I physically, for the most part, can't show them. I can't take a bump. So I can 95% of the way walk you through it, but I can't do that last 5% or 10, whatever it might be. So to be able to like verbalize something and then see other people execute it, and a lot of times execute it better than the way I even pictured it, it's so much bigger than my own wrestling career. Like what I do now as a producer and what I do in my ring, I enjoy it. It's almost maybe a little blasphemous, but I enjoy it more than my own in-ring career, which I'm very proud of my in-ring career. I'm very proud of my body of work. I'm very proud of the level I was able to wrestle at on a consistent basis. But I'm very proud of my role as a producer.
Awesome. Wow. TJ, I can't thank you enough for this.
Oh, my pleasure, Mike.